Lesson 2 is on categories of learners with exceptionalities. When we talk of learners with disabilities and special needs, I know in my last lesson I talked about diverse needs, very different needs. You cannot look at them as one. Their needs are very different. And now we want to look at the categories. When you talk about them, how do we categorize them? First, we're saying learners with special needs fall within the following broad categories. They are broader categories because in some of these categories we'll have smaller categories. First, we look at the sensory impairments. Then we have cognitive differences. Then communication difficulties, emotional and behavioral difficulties, physical and multiple differences, and finally we have those living under difficult circumstances. Maybe one could be wondering, are those really having disabilities? But remember, now we are talking about learners with exceptionalities and not just those with disabilities. And therefore, maybe at this stage we need to ask ourselves, why learners with exceptionalities? What do we mean by exceptionalities? Because as we said, with the law that came about in those years in America, we seized, after the progress that came about up to the time we went into this conference organized by the UNESCO, where now we are looking at a broader group of children, not just those with visible disabilities that we are able to see, but we are looking at other things that can make a child not be able to concentrate in class, and again, not be able to participate at the same level with the other learners. So learners with exceptionalities are those that are different, those who deviate from the norm. It can be long-lasting, it can be within a short period of time, but at that particular time, they are not like those that, in special needs, we don't like talking about normal children, because when we say normal children, it's like we are saying the others are abnormal. But we are saying in one way or another, they deviate from the norm, that which is expected of every learner. We'll be looking at the learners with sensory impairment, and we'll start with those with hearing impairment. Like I said earlier, there are two types. There are those who can hear a bit, but cannot hear at the normal level of every human being. So these are learners or children that we refer to as hard of hearing, because they are not deaf. Since they hear, we cannot refer to them as deaf. So they are able to hear a bit, they can follow speech, they can acquire spoken language with or without hearing aid. They require raised voice, quiet surrounding, and be able to look at, to be able to see the person who's talking to them so that they can lip read. The other category is that of the deaf. Those who are deaf have very severe hearing loss. They cannot hear at all. They cannot understand any speech, oral speech, and they cannot really be assisted by a hearing aid because they can't hear at all. We'll look at the different classifications of hearing loss, and we will start by hearing loss according to severity. There are different ways of classifying hearing loss, so we'll start by hearing loss according to severity, where first we have those who have slight hearing loss. These ones, even the larger community may not know because they mix with them. It's only that they strain a bit. They are able to hear, they can follow normal conversation, mostly if there is no noise in the room. And when we have learners like those in the classroom, they are recommended to sit near the teacher so that they are not distracted by any other noise or movement. When they are nearer the teacher, they are able to hear and they can just continue. They do not need any other intervention as long as they are able to hear the teacher. The second category is mild hearing loss. With the mild hearing loss, one cannot understand conversation from about a meter away and is likely to miss 50% of class discussions if the voices are faint. If the person who's talking, if the teacher who is talking is not really raising their voice, they are likely to miss around 50% of what is being said. Then therefore they should sit in a place where they are able to face the person who's speaking, or they can use a hearing aid. A hearing aid can amplify their capability of hearing, and they would be able to follow conversation. The third category is moderate hearing loss. Moderate, these are learners who will have difficulties hearing in all situations. They'll have deficiency in language use and comprehension, and they have limited vocabulary because they are not able to pick many words due to their hearing loss. They may have very limited vocabulary. Using language, understanding language can be a problem to them. And they also need to use a hearing aid or get the help of a speech therapist who can help them be able to understand when someone else speaks, be able to lip read. With the help of a speech therapist or speech training, they can manage in the classrooms. Then we have severe hearing loss. With a severe hearing loss, one can hear very loud voices, about 30 centimeters from the ear. But I'm talking about voices, not really conversation. Can identify environmental sounds. Environmental sounds are like a vehicle or a lorry passing by or an airplane passing by. Can discriminate vowels but not consonants as they look at you and see you speak. And therefore they should use a hearing aid, and these ones now will require what we call total communication instruction. Total communication instruction is whereby you're using sign language, you're using gestures, you're using all forms of communication to facilitate them to be able to follow conversation. And finally, we have the profoundly deaf, those who have lost their hearing loss completely. May hear some loud sounds, but not with everyone. They are conscious of vibrations more than sounds, tonal patterns. They can feel vibrations, and they are very, very sensitive to such movements. They can feel them when you cannot feel them, but they are very, very sensitive to vibrations. They rely on vision as the primary avenue of communication. They look, read your face. They'll be able to know whether you are annoyed, whether you are happy. They will use sign language. They will receive through sign language. In a classroom, because they are using vision, use as much as possible charts, visual learning materials, so that they are able to really get what you're trying to teach. Unlike those who will hear and who will also see. But for them, they rely so much on their eyes. So trips, learning outdoor really is very, very helpful for them. And therefore, sign language would be the best for them for instruction in the classroom. Then we look at another classification of hearing loss according to age on onset. When did one lose their hearing? And here we have two categories. We talk about prelingual deafness. This is deafness that occurs before a child develops language, before they are able to speak. Maybe they're born, and then just before the time they should be learning how to speak, they lose their hearing. That's prelingual. And it's very different from one who loses hearing after they have acquired language, which is the second category that we refer to as postlingual. For those who are able to speak, it's very easy for them because they can tell sounds, they can tell words, and when they look at you, they will be able to tell what you're saying, and they'll also be able to understand what they read. Unlike this other one who never got to know any word, hear any word being spoken, and therefore even when they read, it's like another language that they are using altogether, because for them, they never associate at all with the language of words and speech. Then the other categorization is when you look at which part of the ear has been affected. And here we have three different groups in this. Conductive hearing loss. This is hearing loss that comes as a result of damage either in the middle ear or the outer part of the ear. Usually it leads to mild or moderate hearing loss. Then we have sensory neural hearing loss. Here is when we're talking about damage in the inner ear, leading to severe hearing loss. When you talk about inner ear, we are talking about the connection between the ear and the brain. The auditory nerve not able to connect with the brain. And therefore this becomes severe because it's not able to translate whatever the ear picks from the environment. And therefore it is serious damage and it can lead to severe hearing loss. The third one is when one has both, has conductive hearing loss and also have the sensory neural hearing loss. The outer ear, the middle ear, and then also the inner ear that now connects to the brain. This combination can also lead to serious loss of hearing. Now, how do we tell that somebody has a hearing loss? Because in most cases, parents may get to know, but parents tend not to believe that their children are not hearing or they have a hearing problem. So they will take them to school, and it is at the school where teachers really get to know that this child has a problem. What are the indicators? What do we see that make us suspect that this person could be having a hearing loss? Now, we'll start with learners who are hard of hearing. We said hard of hearing are learners who can hear a little bit but cannot hear everything. They only have some residual hearing capability. Now, so these are learners who frequently ask you to repeat when you speak to them. And this, I would want to say, also applies even to us adults, because sometimes we never get to know that we have a problem of hearing until maybe somebody points it out to us. So here is a learner who, every time you say something, they will ask you to repeat. That is an indication that they could be having a problem, because if it happens every other time, very frequently. Another characteristic is one could speak loudly. And mostly that is what happens. Because they cannot hear themselves, they tend to speak louder than expected. It is an indication that that person could be having a hearing loss. So others will speak softly. Some will speak loudly, others will speak softly, but they think that they are speaking loud enough because they cannot hear themselves very well when they speak. They are not aware whether they are shouting or whether they are speaking very softly. Another indication is cupping their ears in the direction of the sound. Maybe you're talking to them and they tend to do this, cupping their ear like this. They never tend to know that they're doing it, but it is an indication that they want to really hear you very well, and that's why they are cupping their ears. Another is staring at the speaker's face. You realize when you're speaking, they will want to really so much look at your face. And why do they look at your face? Because they want to really not miss out on something. They are trying to follow your lips. They are trying to read your face because they are not hearing properly, but they may not know. Those are some of the indicators that this learner who's doing this will always follow with you and cannot be doing something else when you're speaking. They just want to look at your face as you speak. That is another indicator. Sometimes they do not respond when you give instructions. And these ones are really sometimes seen as being rude or disobedient, because you're telling them, can you go this, do this, can you go out, or can you go and bring me this, but they are not responding to what you're telling them. And it happens today, it happens tomorrow, and maybe when you say it again, they are surprised, and especially when you say that, why am I telling you this so many times and you're not doing it? It is an indication that they could be having a hearing loss. And the last one there is avoid participating in oral discussions. This is a learner in class, and you realize this person does not ever raise their hand up to answer a question or to discuss or to be in a group where people are talking, because he knows he's missing out. He can see maybe they're speaking, but he's not hearing exactly what they're saying. So it is also another indication when you see someone not really wanting to join a group to speak, where there is a discussion or where there is something that they are talking about, it is an indicator that they could be having a hearing loss. Now, these are learners. There we were talking about learners who are able to hear just a little bit, and therefore they are managing. They are managing in class, and they are following, but they are having difficulties, and they may not know. So it's for you as the teacher to be able to identify and send them for assessment so that they are tested and interventions are given. And then what are the characteristics of learners who are deaf? These ones do not acquire spoken language when they are deaf. Remember I said when they are deaf, they don't hear at all. So they will not be able to speak, not because there's a problem with their vocal cords, but because they are not able to pick any language from other people around them and therefore be able to speak. They have limited social relationships, and we can understand why. Because they will not participate in the discussion, they are not able to socialize. They tend to stay by themselves because they can't hear and they cannot participate. They mainly use gestures or signs to make themselves understood. So when you see a child is using gestures, it's not really speaking, there's a possibility that they could be having, or they could be deaf, but also we see the same, especially that characteristic. We also see it so much with children who are autistic. But here we're talking about for you as a parent, as a teacher, to know that they are not really hearing. That is an indicator. And the last one there is that they have frequent substitutions and omissions of sounds, especially consonants. Because when they learn sign language and when they go through speech therapy or speech training, they tend to learn to speak a bit, but they will not pronounce consonants because they cannot hear them. Consonants are the sounds that you can really tell that that's an S, that's a T, that's a pa, but for them, they cannot really tell which is which, and therefore, even when they try to speak, they will not sound the consonants. Now, what are the educational interventions for learners with hearing impairment? One, we need to advise on appropriate school program placement. Although we talked about inclusive education, that learners with disabilities and special needs should be in regular schools, depending on the levels, as we said. We talked about slight, we talked about mild, moderate, severe, profound. They may not fit in the regular, but as we speak in our country today, we still have special schools, we have special units for learners who have hearing impairment. If it is mild, if it is slight, they can manage in the regular school, but they also the teachers need to know, and they also need the help of hearing aids. So it's for you as a teacher to advise. The minute you notice they have a problem, first of all, advise them to go for assessment. Once it is confirmed, the level of hearing loss is confirmed, then for you and as the teacher with the parent, you can advise the best placement for learning. So we're saying it could be regular, could be special school, could be special unit, whatever, depending on their need. Then you can advise parents also to seek medical help where applicable, because sometimes it could be something that can be corrected. So advise the parents to seek that correction for their learners to be able to hear. Encourage family, school, and community to learn communication skills. If here is a learner who can only benefit from sign language or total communication, we all maybe may not be able to use the official Kenyan Sign Language, but in one way or another in life, we find ourselves using signs. But at the same time, you can also use gestures. You can use the total communication that we talked about to be able to communicate to one who is deaf. In the classroom as well, the teachers should also be advised to use total communication for a learner who is not benefiting from the hearing aids. Should also provide the learner with preferential seating in class. What do I mean by preferential? It should not be you, the teacher, to decide that this is where I want you to sit, that this position is good for you. Because what you might think is good for the student may not be the best. So the teacher needs to come to class with the learner, take different positions with the learner, just the learner alone without the others, and let them tell you, and then you're speaking from wherever you are at the front, and let them tell you where they feel is the best for them. Preferential, because sometimes one ear could be more damaged than the other. One could be damaged, the other one could be okay. So it really depends on the position where they sit, whether it's against the wall or in the middle or the wall on the right, the wall on the left. All will be determined by the learner himself or herself, depending on where they feel they're benefiting best. So lastly, we're saying engage parental collaboration as much as possible. If you're assisting the learner, work with the parent so that whatever you're trying to make them learn in school, they're helping you when they go home. And you also understand the other issues related with psychological issues, social issues, because some of these learners tend to feel like they are discriminated or they are segregated because they are not speaking within the family. So when you work with the family, you'll be helping this learner to grow academically, to grow socially, and also psychologically, because a number of them tend to feel like they are lesser people because they are not able to hear like everyone else in the family. Now, we will continue with learners with sensory impairments, and this time we'll be looking at learners with visual impairment. These are learners who have difficulties with the structure or functioning of the eyes. They range from slight visual impairments to blindness. And when we talk of the structure of or functioning, those are two different things. Structure could be the positioning of your eyes, the eye itself. And there is also the functioning of the eye, which could be maybe something to do with the optic nerve, the connection between the optic nerve and the brain. So that's why we are looking at the structure and functioning as two different things. So the two major categories we have for learners with visual impairment are learners with low vision and learners who are blind. Those with low vision are learners who have significant visual handicap as well as significant vision that can be used. Yes, they have a problem. Their eyes are not perfect, but they can see. Again, their sight can vary with the degree or the level of loss. So there are those who can manage, who write, who strain, who bring the books close to their eyes, and they will manage their way through. But we say they have low vision because they are able to see a bit, but they are not able to see within the normal range. They can use their vision for main school activities with, depending on the amount of light, the contrast of the lighting in the room, again, individual differences, and the level of the visual loss. Those who are blind have total loss of the sense of vision. They don't see at all. And they're not able to tell darkness and light. For them, it's all the same. And those are the ones that we refer to as blind. But in some of the schools for the blind, you'll find some learners who have low vision, especially those with albinism. Mostly their eyes tend to be affected by that lack of coloration, and majority of them are or have low vision. Now, characteristics of learners with visual impairment. How do we know that a learner who is sitting in your class has a visual impairment? And one thing I would like to mention at this stage is that some of these impairments develop with time. They may not even know. The parents may not even know. It could be something that happened, maybe an illness, as we saw previously, that is leading to this loss, hearing loss or visual loss. So they may not be aware, and it can happen to anyone. So you could be having a learner in class who has been okay, but you start seeing these kind of characteristics. And that is why we want to understand what are these things that we see in learners that can make us really tell that this learner is having a problem, whether hearing or visual. Now, those with visual impairments will exhibit one or more of the following. There are a number. One, significant difficulties reading or copying from the chalkboard. As you write, whatever you write on the chalkboard, what they write is really different from what you have written. That is an indication that maybe they are not able to see well, and therefore they are writing what they see. And also they are reading what they see, if they are reading from the book or they are reading from the chalkboard. They tend to tilt their head to one side while reading. Even for us adults, sometimes we may not be conscious, but when you see someone reading with tilting their head on one side and always that one side, it is an indication that could be one eye is not able to see properly. Holding books close or far from the eyes, very close or very far away from the eyes is another indication. Complain of too much or little light in the classroom. For those who are okay, the lighting is okay, but for those with the visual problems, some may see as if the light is too much, others may see as if the light is dim, but it's because they have a problem with their eyes. They make quick eye movements from side to side. And this is very common with those with albinism, that you'll see that their eyes are always moving from one side to the other. It is an indication that they have a problem with their eyesight. They may also complain of double vision. What do I mean by double vision? Double vision is when you're seeing one thing in twos. Yeah, when you're looking at someone and you're seeing like they are two and it's the same person, that's double vision, is also a problem with the eyesight. Watery or reddish painful eyes is another indication. You see a student or a learner in class whose eyes are ever watery and they are reddish, it means they need assistance. Omission of some letters while reading or writing. That they are not writing some of the letters, it's an indication that they are not able to see well and therefore they're just writing what they are able to see. And also another one, use of index finger. When they are reading, they are pointing on the words that they are reading with their index finger. This sometimes we even see with adults. It's an indication that they are not able to see very well. And finally, they have clumsy movement or poor balance while walking. They move heads instead of eyes while reading. So normally you move your eyes, but anybody who has a problem will be moving the whole head as they read from one end to the other of a line in a book or a page on a page. So what are the interventions, educational intervention strategies that teachers need to put into place to be able to assist such learners? Once you have identified them, you have seen this one has a problem, the first thing, as we said, is advised to go for assessment so that it is confirmed and also the level is known, and if it is anything medical, they are referred there, any other referrals. But for us, we are more concerned now with the educational intervention strategies. For those with low vision, we need to provide them with preferential seating in class, just as we did with those with hearing impairment, and especially those who are hard of hearing. Be with them in class, let them choose the best position where they can see the best. Because for you may not know. You might think the front is best for them, but it could be that they are better at the back. They might think the center is good for them, but depending on the eye and the level of loss, maybe they need to be on the side, the right or the left. So be with them and offer them preferential seating. Provide large print material. This is one thing that we are not very good of in this country. We forget that not everybody would be able to read, for example, whatever material you offer, but it is always good to remember that there are those who are not able to see well, and we need to think of large print materials as an alternative for those with low vision. Advise parents to get specialist advice and to get optical or low vision devices. If we are not able to offer large print material, there are devices, assistive devices for low vision. Mostly they can even use spectacles depending on the specialist advice, but some will also do with just a magnifying glass, a magnifier, something that can magnify whatever they are reading. Advise parents, once they go for assessment and the level of sight is seen, then maybe that's all they would need, and they'd be able to fit in the classroom with those magnifying devices that are facilitating their reading. Assign sighted learners to act as guides and as support. Remember, if they're not able to see the board clearly, it would be good to allocate, you as the teacher, assign a certain student to always be with the student, sit next to the student and be able to read for them, or even as they walk around, if they need to read any signs all over the environment, this other person whom you have allocated or assigned is helping them to read. And also ensure enough lighting in the classroom. Always ensure that the class is not dark, that the lighting is adequate. What do we need to do for those who are blind? One, we train them in orientation and mobility. It is very, very important that we are making them be able to walk around on their own, understand their environment. That is orientation. That they are able to tell from this point to that point, how many steps do I need to make? Very important for them. And with the canes, the canes that help them walk around, they'll be able to manage within the school. Mobility also is now with the cane. Some may not even need the cane once they are trained in orientation and mobility, so that they are able to walk around and they know where they need to go at what time. Train them in typing, writing, and reading Braille. Braille is very important for them because they are not able to see, but they also need to know how to use the machine. Number one, provide the Braille machine. Let them know how to use it, how to type it, how to read Braille, and how to even write the same Braille. Train them in activities on daily living skills. How do they manage their lives so that they are not so dependable and they are able to do things for themselves. Provide tactile diagrams. When others are using diagrams, they are using their eyes. Get alternative diagrams for them where they may just have to touch and they are able to learn with the others and they are not feeling left out simply because they are not able to see the diagrams the others are using. And when you talk of tactile diagrams, also tactile material, for example, they are also able to access the typing material, the special paper that we use for Braille, so that at the end of it, they are able to touch and they are able to read what they have typed. Train them also on auditory and listening skills. Now that they are not able to see, they really need to be very good in their listening and be able to use their ears. But mostly, unless it's someone who has become blind later, anybody, for those who are born and who have grown up with that condition, their hearing is very, very strong because they rely on their ears more because they are not able to use their eyes. Then under learners with sensory impairments, we have learners who are deaf-blind. Most people wonder when they hear of deaf blindness, but yes, it's true that there are learners or there are people who are both deaf and blind. It is a condition where a person has both visual and hearing impairments. The degree of loss may also vary. They could be seeing a bit and not hearing at all. It depends. All these special needs are very, very diverse and depends on individual, and so they are very diverse individual differences on the same condition. This condition causes severe communication and other developmental and educational needs. And you can understand, because for those with hearing impairment, they use their eyes to learn. Those with visual impairment, they use their ears to learn. But now here is a learner who has impairments in their hearing and in their visual capability. They are there. There are not so many. We actually have a special school, a unit for learners with deaf blindness in Nairobi, Kilimani, around Hurlingham. And it would be important if you visited to see for yourself when we talk about learners who are both deaf and blind, and they learn, and how they learn. So it's also very difficult to accommodate them in special education programs, solely for children with deafness or even for children with blindness, because they will not fit in there. Those with blindness use their ears, those with hearing impairment use their eyes, and here they are, and they have problems with both. But there is that particular special unit where there are children who are taught, although they really encounter a lot of difficulties, and therefore they may not achieve as much because of having both conditions. Now, educational intervention strategies for those learners with deaf blindness: show positive attitude, encourage them to use residual hearing if there is any. They could be having a hearing impairment, but they are not completely deaf. So if they have some little hearing, encourage them to use that little hearing that they have. Maintain personal contact with the learner. Very good to be very close to them so that they feel that they also belong. And provide hearing aids or optical devices where necessary. If their loss of sight can be improved by optical devices, provide. If their hearing, the remaining hearing, can be improved by hearing aids, provide them where possible. Then train them on communication skills so that they are able to communicate despite the fact that they are having hearing and a visual impairment. Motor skills, how do they do their own things for themselves? And also self-care skills. They need, so that they are not so dependent on other people. It's important that they are trained on how to care for themselves, and also cognitive skills and social skills. Social skills are very, very important to every human being. At least you feel that you're able to relate to someone else. You are not just living alone, feeling so lonely. Let them be able to socialize despite the condition that they have. We have come to the end of our lesson 2, and we have an assignment. And in this assignment, you're saying highlight 4 characteristics of a learner with visual impairment and a learner with hearing impairment. And then we'll move on now to the next lesson, but we are saying you need to remember to stay safe, especially now. So we move on to lesson 3.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.